Ladies and gentlemen, it's a Ukrainian talk show on Pod TV. My name is Sasha Star, and my guest today is Dr. Jonathan Lockwood. Welcome to the show, Jonathan.
Thank you, Sasha. Glad to be here as always.
Yeah, what's interesting is that I just read before the show that one of the favorite papers by Donald Trump is New York Post.
Oh,
And
yes.
today,
Relatively conservative, yes.
yeah, and
Very
today,
good.
guess what? On the first page of New York Post, there was something that says there was a big picture of Vladimir Putin, and it says on all page, "This is a dictator."
Very good. They're trying to see if how many people recognize the obvious, and they're pointing us and saying, "Hello, does anybody out here recognize a dictator when they see one?" And I would also add to that you note that that in the Bible, it, Christ referred to Satan as the father of lies, and you are seeing the Russians, true to their history and culture, unleashing what I would call a barrage of lies in order to obfuscate, to confuse the other side, and hopefully to get what they want. My reaction to all of this, contrary to most commentators, many commentators in the West who are reacting with what I would call snap judgments, panic, and some other inappropriate reactions. I feel like reacting like the character of Mr. Spock in one of those old Star Trek episodes, where he simply says, in reaction to a situation, "Fascinating." And this is a situation where it would be very wise not to react and conclude that you know exactly what's going to happen in the midst of what are seemingly very confusing responses on the part of the current Trump administration. Now, President Trump has prided himself on being able to make a good deal. For his book, The Art of the Deal.
But good deal for himself, not for Ukraine or anybody else.
Right, for yourself. Now we are going to see if he knows how to recognize a bad deal, a really bad deal. Yeah, the one that a deal with that looks good on the surface, but has potentially bad consequences in the longer term. This is an interesting test, and it is also interesting to note the reaction of the NATO allies, who are already maneuvering to try and give promises of support to Ukraine to resist in the short to intermediate term. At least they say right now that Ukraine has enough resources being given to it that have been given to it by the U.S. to get them at least to the summer of this year. That's also very interesting because as other sources have noted, the Russian offensive is steadily losing steam. It is steadily losing power. They are taking more and more casualties. Contrary to what their propaganda is stating, they are not rapidly, they are not on the verge of a breakthrough. They are not on the verge of wiping out Ukraine or achieving total victory. And yet that is the narrative that Putin is going to attempt to propagate, according to another source, that he plans to declare victory on February 24th, which should be a real test of, just whether or not people are going to be able to see through the barrage of lies. So here, this is both danger and opportunity for Ukraine. Danger in the sense that its allies and its backers might allow themselves to be intimidated and persuaded falsely to go for a false peace or for what looks like the illusion of peace and a settlement in the short term. But instead, again, because I've said before, we do not know absolutely everything that is going on behind the scenes. We do not know the true intentions or the future actions necessarily of of the sides involved. We do know pretty much that Russia is going to continue its offensive as best it can, and its propaganda campaign, hoping to gain politically what it cannot gain on the battlefield. What I have been stating all along is that there is an opportunity for Ukraine if it can as best it can cobble together one if it may have a real capability to engage in a local surprise counterattack. And it depends on where that counterattack is launched and whether or not it is well timed. I would contend that, contrary to most commentators, that Crimea does represent an opportunity if Ukraine is able to launch a successful counterattack at the right time, and preferably before Mr. Putin can declare victory on February 24th. So what we are seeing right now, we are at a crucial hinge of history, in my view. And you will also recall that during the Second World War, there were times, particularly before decisive defeats by the Axis, where it looked as if they were on the verge of victory. I'll point out to you, for example, the Axis offensive, Rommel's offensive in North Africa in 1942, summer of 42, where they were driving towards Alexandria and the Allies were panicking. They were evacuating embassies in Egypt and evacuating in the Middle East and preparing for a Nazi breakthrough into the Middle East and to seize the Suez Canal and seize Alexandria. And yet the offensive, Montgomery was able to establish that defense at the El Alamein line and prevent an Axis breakthrough. And then that was followed immediately thereafter by Operation Torch, where at the other end of North Africa, the U.S. invaded. So my point is that it is just a little too soon to be drawing a snap judgment and declaring total defeat.
Jonathan, you're talking about a real war where real armies and real generals were fighting. When you take the situation today, so you have U.S. who imposed on itself a role of an arbitrator. Let's see, you have two sides and they cannot agree on something. So you need arbitrator who will make his opinion, and at least both sides will abide. So here we have an arbitrator who tells to one side that first they have to provide $500 billion of mineral resources to an arbitrator. And only then arbitrator will start functioning, but not before. I've never seen anything. I've been in business for many years. I follow the different cases. I've never seen anything like this in the history of the world, where arbitrator would ask one of the parties first to come up with the incredible amount of wealth to satisfy arbitrator, and only then arbitration would start. But I would like to ask you, Jonathan, if let's see, if Zelensky would sign the document and there are no absolutely requirement on arbitrator to provide any funds or weapons to Ukraine to continue to fight, because the war is still going on. The $500 billion of mineral wealth, at least paper that Zelensky would sign, it wouldn't stop the war. The war would still continue on, and then every day, hundreds of Ukrainians, children included, they're still being killed. So not only that, arbitrator may not even provide any more weapons or anything, because first of all, it's not even part of the agreement. Second of all, they can say, well, this agreement refers to funds that you were already provided. So first you have to pay this back, and only then we will provide some weapons or something else like this. So this is a very clear case to me that the so-called arbitrator, namely President Donald Trump and his team, are not acting in good faith, to put it mildly, very, very mildly and nicely. So we don't have to, as you suggest, and I agree with you, we don't have to run to all kind of decisions and hold back and just see what's going to happen. But don't we see enough what's happening in the last week and a half?
No. We have not seen enough.
Okay, what else would you like to see, Jonathan?
Well, I would like to see whether or not the Trump team, again, we have where if this is still in progress, we'll have to see whether or not once the Trump team sees that Russia is not genuinely interested in negotiations, and sooner or later they are going to be confronted with this, whether or not they don't, in effect, change their minds and say, okay, remember that Trump had said previously to Putin in public, we can do this the easy way or we can do this the hard way. And if the Russians continue to be intransigent and deaf to any signs of negotiation or or serious intent to have a ceasefire as in preparation for some kind of negotiated peace, then it will remain to be seen whether or not the Trump team says, all right, we're going to do this the hard way. That has not been resolved yet. So again, it is one of the hardest things to do during a dispute is to be patient and wait for your opponent to make a mistake. The Russians, I believe.
Who is whose opponent? You believe that Putin is Trump's opponent?
Oh yes.
No.
Whether right now the Trump team regards Putin as the lesser opponent. Their priorities apparently are, but they believe that China is the greater opponent. Mm-hmm. So right now it's very ambiguous signals that the Trump team is saying, and confusing signals, I must admit. So in this case, I am not going to come down and draw a conclusion when the signals and the information are still conflicting and ambiguous. And I still contend that Ukraine holds a significant wild card in that it can undertake. Seeing the situation, if I were in Ukraine's position, and I am going to try to refrain from mirror imaging, but if I were in Ukraine's position and seeing the situation that is developing, I would be very strongly tempted to undertake a decisive military action as best I could within the circumstances in an attempt to alter the political situation. It would be very similar to what other leaders and what other nations have done in past conflicts, such as the American Civil War, when one side, the South, saw that it was in a desperate situation and undertook an offensive.
I'm not against your proposed action for Ukraine. Just have in mind that there is a lot of responsibilities are on the Zelensky's shoulders, and obviously, okay, he's still very popular. His rating of popularity well above 60%. Remember, yes. Trump has 47%. So what I'm trying to say is that 84% of Ukrainians are against election held during the war time.
Understandable, given the situation that they're in. They're not in a mood. They're in no mood, obviously, to conduct elections with potentially elections which the Russians would without any doubt, try to disrupt or manipulate in whatever way they could. However.
But who is pushing for election? It's Putin and Donald Trump. There are only two people who are really pushing for election, considering that Zelensky is probably not the best opponent for both of them. So they would like to get rid of Zelensky, and therefore they would like to disregard Ukrainian constitution or anything like this. So they really want to change the game in their favor. That's not going to work. Nope. Now, another thing is that so Zelensky is very in this situation where he is still very popular, that Ukraine holds its own. He's very risk averse to some attacks, as you suggested. I'm not saying that he's right. I'm just trying to read his mind. Whenever he's trying to at least save coalition between Ukraine and European Union countries. I'm not talking about NATO, because I'm not sure that NATO will be even around in a few months from now, but at least the European Union. Okay, so if he can do that he continues the war. Now, if he'll do something and European Union, European countries will turn away from Ukraine, with US already turned away from Ukraine, then the best option for Zelensky would be simply to discuss a deal with Putin to do some kind of at least stop the shooting. And this way he doesn't need US for that. He doesn't need to provide US with $500 billion worth of wealth. And it could be just a deal between Putin and Zelensky, regardless how hard it will be for Zelensky and Ukraine, because we don't know what Putin will impose on the table for Zelensky to agree. But
pretty good idea of it.
but it's not going to be much worse than the deal proposed by Donald Trump, minus $500 billion potential for Zelensky loss of this riches. So I really don't know. There are many options. Your option is a very good one, to try to find the most vulnerable, perhaps Crimea, object to attack. And it could be successful, and it could play very well in negotiations. But that's not up to us to decide.
Exactly, and that is why I am very reluctant to try to draw a definitive conclusion as to what is about to happen next, because you notice that many commentators in the West, you've seen all these people drawing these what I call snap conclusions. They say, "Oh, NATO is finished." Oh, Putin is going to win his victory over NATO, or President Trump is going to go down as the man who betrayed Europe, and all these a whole bunch of snap judgments, which we saw no sign of in the previous 3 years, and there were a lot of there have been a lot of snap judgments going on during the entire course of this war. Remember at the beginning, people were saying, "Oh, Ukraine's going to fall in a few days." Well, everybody, all those analysts should have been fired, but no. What did they do? They simply backtracked and pretend they never said that, and promptly go on to render more snap judgments during the course of the war. So, simply because now we have a very interesting change in the dynamic, it is. I would counsel that it is premature, even though it looks bad. Again, we are looking on the surface. We cannot read the minds of all of the participants, whether it's Ukraine, Russia, or the United States. So, while it is tempting to take counsel of our fears, as others have said that Lincoln criticized McClellan for taking counsel of his fears too often. And so this is a problem that you have to, as difficult as it is in this situation, to take counsel of your fears, or to despair, or to conclude that all is lost. There are still events in my book, for example. My analytical method for prediction, I talk about how the future is the sum total of interactions of free will. Every action by every individual at every moment in time has the potential to affect the future, either in ways either subtle or dramatic. The classic recent example of this is a decision to turn your head to look at a chart a split second before an assassin's bullet intended to go through your head instead goes through your right ear. Whether President Trump had turned his head or not, either of those decisions has a dramatic effect on the future. It's a very subtle action, but it's a dramatic one. And every action that every individual takes during their life on this planet has that kind of potential, depending on when and where it occurs. There is no such action. There is no such thing as an action that has no consequences, whether we realize it or not. So I would say here, are still a host of actions, free will actions, that can be taken on the part of all of the participants, which could have a decisive effect on this conflict and its outcome. So That is why, as tempting as it is to say, "Oh, we now know what's going to happen. All is lost," I would say, "Nope. Wait, hold your." It's kind of like you see the enemy charging at you, and you're told, "Hold your fire, wait, wait," and then at the last moment, unleash your fire. So, this is one of those situations where, yes, I see reasons to be very concerned because I do not have 100% information. I don't have all knowledge of what is going to happen, unlike God, who does have that knowledge. But go ahead.
John, you can operate only with the knowledge that you already have and
Right.
dismiss the knowledge that you don't have. You have today, same as many others, including myself, enough knowledge of something what's already been said and done, and the perception of what's being happening. And I'm trying to anticipate what's going to happen in the next few days, weeks, or so, rather than predict. I'm not making any predictions. I'm trying to anticipate. I'm trying to figure out based on the known information. For example, that Putin went now as far as saying that US have to take out all its military bases from Romania, from Poland, from all these countries in the next few months. Now, does it play in Trump's hands? Absolutely yes, because Trump understands that with his $36.5 trillion worth of debt, the more he's able to save, the better. So, but I have another suggestion. If he will remove all his bases and move all his military back to United States, then he doesn't need $1 trillion military budget. He needs to maybe $50 million to be able to defend against Canada and Mexico, and that's about it. And then they will save $1 trillion a year or so. So this is something what Trump probably could look into. If that's what he's trying to do, is to save. Now, on another subject, I've heard from very trusted sources that there was a discussion with Donald Trump in the White House, and it's coming from one person who was in that room in the White House just in a few days ago. Trump is very seriously preparing U.S. Army to invade Canada and to bring it back as 51st state. Now, based on the trusted source, based on the fact that it's highly unlikely that he would made it up just for amusement or for entertainment purposes, this is something what, and this is he's playing exactly Putin's book. So if Putin wants to annex Crimea, which he did, and all the rest of Ukraine, which he's going to do if he's successful, and then he would go into Baltic states and Poland and wherever else, especially if the US will remove its military bases. So we are now looking, and this is again, it's not prediction. I'm analyzing information that is coming 24 hours a day, all the time, through internet, through television, through, of course, I'm trying to separate trusted sources from some kind of mania, some not trusted information. So this is a world where we exist today. We understand that Putin very cleverly infiltrated the US with agents on all different levels. And they are agents who were going through KGB school, then they would going through Harvard University, and they would go to France to have their dissertation, and then would come back and become very highly placed officials in the United States government and CIA and FBI and wherever else. So U.S., especially now that they're trying to dismantle FBI and many other agencies, and put in charge Tulsi Hubbard on Russian television being called our girl. So you understand what's happening with the United States and with and the 36 trillion and a half trillion dollars worth of debt does not help the situation. Do I have points to be a little bit?
There are points to be considered, although I have reason to question the validity of your declared sources.
Okay.
So, again, that I tend to withhold my judgment until I see further developments, particularly with Ukraine. I contend that Ukraine holds the most powerful wild card in this situation.
How do they play this wild card, in your opinion?
If they would play this wild card by unexpectedly unleashing a timed counteroffensive in a decisive place, it would not do as much good. Again, from my analysis of the situation, for them to do it simply on one of the eastern provinces that the Russians have attempted to annex, it would not have as much dramatic effect. The most dramatic effect, as I've been contending all along, would be in Crimea. And keep in mind also that in past historical situations where we thought we knew what was going on, that where we thought the enemy was not capable of undertaking offensive action, where they, in fact, were able to, such as in the Battle of the Bulge. The Chinese military theorist Sun Tzu has counseled that when you have to deceive your opponent by appearing weak where you are in fact strong, and being able to also conversely being able to conceal weakness. In this case, I believe that Ukraine is, as they have been cleverly able to do during the past history of this war, been able to successfully conceal strength by portraying it as weakness and then unleashing it at an unexpected time. I still contend that that is possible in this situation, as volatile as it is, for Ukraine to, again, pull an operational surprise that will, so to speak, shuffle the deck.
Okay, Jonathan, fine. I would be very happy if that's indeed what is going to happen.
Well, we have to wait and see, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, on the other hand, while it's very clear that the involvement of U.S. The way it goes now you're saying that we haven't seen the last war, and it can change. But until that happens, the way it goes now, I think Ukraine will be better off, as I mentioned before, to test resolve of Europeans to continue to help Ukraine. And
They are engaged in those kinds of discussions. I grant of that, and that's a positive development.
okay, and if that works, kindly ask US, thank you very much for your help. We really appreciate it. But in the meantime, we don't need you as negotiator or as providing any further help. Thank you very much. And just be happy and just completely stop their involvement, because the way it is now, its involvement is 100% on the Russian side, makes Putin much stronger. And if he still wants to negotiate with Putin and later on with Xi to divide the world and become one of the supreme rulers of the universe, that's fine, but not with.
Yeah, that would be a bit of a stretch.
I can go a little bit farther than that. I will go a little bit farther. Is it later, sooner or later, while Trump is still in power, U.S. will join BRICS. I think that this is inevitable, because with the $36.5 trillion worth of debt and growing, there is no way. Now, Chinese, Japanese buyers of U.S. bonds, they finish. They don't touch U.S. dollars based assets. So U.S. is looking at financial ruin, and they have to do something. And that's where BRICS comes very handy, because they're developing their own currency. They may go half gold standard. So that could actually, and they will be very happy to help U.S. any way they can. So we are looking
Now,
at a different scenario, but that's my opinion.
yeah,
Only,
sure, yeah.
only
And
that's
and
it.
and from my perspective, if the current debt reduction efforts on the which are only really just getting started with Doge and attempting to reduce the deficit, the way to measure the success of that is if now, as you know, the interest on the national debt is around is slightly larger than the defense budget. It's right around 898 billion and approaching 1 trillion. The way to measure the success of Doge efforts is if once they have completed their debt reduction efforts, does it result in a real debt reduction in order to pay off the interest, in order to pay off the national debt? Is it at least equal to the interest on the national debt? Now, if they do that, they are in effect breaking even. They are treading water. I would give them a gentleman's C for that effort. At least it's not getting any worse. The real measure of success is if they manage to find annual debt reductions totaling more than 1 trillion. The greater the amount of reduction in the national debt that they can in annual budget expenditures, then the greater than 1 trillion this amount is, and you are able to apply that against the national debt, then that reduces the amount of interest that needs to be paid on the national debt in subsequent years. You have started the process in reverse, which is a positive development. And that in turn, over the long term, if you can sustain that and continue to reduce the amount of interest on the national debt per year and thus make your debt reduction efforts even easier, then that has the potential to fully stabilize the U.S. economic situation and in the longer term enable it to assist its allies should a future administration change its mind and its stance. And then there are positive developments. But the situation right now is so complex that you have to look that you cannot divide the economic sphere from the military one. The economic sphere, the success of the U.S. in cleaning up its economic house and stabilizing its economic situation is inextricably tied to its ability to sustain its military power. Now, on the other side, Russia, their military system. I saw a film just yesterday, which showed how it was from a Ukrainian source that showed how the Russian military is absolutely riddled with corruption in its production of its military products, in the feeding and clothing and equipping of its soldiers. It looks like almost like a Potemkin village, where it looks good on the surface, but its actual capability is practically a hollow military. And the Russians are trying to make up with numbers what they lack in quality. I know that Lenin once said that quantity has a quality all its own. Well, that may be true up to a point, but in the Second World War, the Russian military had to be rescued by some serious quality supplies from the U.S., such as Ford trucks. So in any case, there are serious weaknesses on the Russian side, which counterbalance the entire situation. And the real variable here now is political will and the ability to stick to not yield to the false claims of the other side. This is a very delicate, very dynamically developing situation. And although I can see your reason to be pessimistic, I fully appreciate that. It really is. It can be discouraging at times, but again, there are instances in history where suddenly, without any warning, an event occurs which suddenly reverses the entire situation. So, while I fully agree and sympathize with your level of concern regarding what you see, it is also imperative to look at all the factors that are weighing on the other side of the equation. And we say, okay, we have to wait and see here, because I am tempted from my perspective to say to say to someone on the Trump administration team says, your Russia advisor is not really doing his or her job very well. And I said, if you really want to do it well, fire him and hire me. But,
no, Trump is doing different things. He's not hiring him or you. He's hiring Mr. Putin himself. And that's where he understands there will be no further threats from Russia. There will be a great divide the world situation where Europe, Ukraine, also will becoming nonsense. It will be three powers, US, Russia, and China, which will rule the world. And in that scenario, US joining BRICS doesn't look to me so odious and impossible. However, we'll see that soon because the news are coming almost every 10 minutes, sometimes for some people more often than that.
Yeah, it's like I said on another program. If you don't like the situation that's currently occurring, just wait 10 minutes.
Yeah,
because it's continually changing.
Yeah, it's like one German journalist, but it was at the beginning of the century, of the previous century, of course. He loved Holland, Netherlands, and he said that if there will be the time in Holland at the time was going very slowly. Of course, it was before internet and before those today's devices. So he was saying, if there will be at the end of the world, I will definitely move to Holland because everything in Holland is happening 6 months later than in the real world. So I will have extra 6 months.
Yeah, exactly. That is a good one.
Yeah.
Well, and I have and my particular favorite saying in a situation like this is to remember what Mark Twain once said. History doesn't repeat itself. It does rhyme, though.
Absolutely, John.
And that's why so many people. That's why so many people, to their credit, to a certain extent, are reminding people about Munich in 1938 and what was the result of that. And I myself, wrote an editorial in the 90s after the 1994 agreement, where Ukraine was forced to give up its nuclear weapons. The editorial was entitled "Song of Peace Has Undertones of Appeasement."
I'm surprised that nobody from Ukrainian delegation, when it was mentioned that this mineral wealth will be used to pay US back for the funds that they already spent in Ukraine, why nobody mentions the Budapest Memorandum, which a US is clearly in default, and the funds that they're spent so far in Ukraine may not even cover whatever they should be provided by Budapest Memorandum, and they failed on that. I'm surprised. Well, I understand the reasons they don't want to alienate Donald Trump even further, but it may be at the point that it doesn't matter anymore. There will be more alienation or less, but we'll see. Again, I don't want to make predictions. And in the meantime, Jonathan, thank you so much for these programs and your words of wisdom. And
are you trying to plug my suggestion on the Worldwide Strategic Defense Matrix?
Yeah,
yeah. The wisdom would be quite welcome in that sense, because remember, Secretary Hegseth and President Trump, they want to construct this Iron Dome over America. Well, that's very nice, except that the Iron Dome has a hole in it. It has intercontinental ballistic missiles. The only way you stop that is with space-based interceptors that cannot easily be shot out of the sky by the opponent's counter-space weapons. In that case, you have starships bought from Elon Musk's SpaceX to create and upgrade the U.S. Space Force.
Yeah,
that's the only thing that, by the way, you and I are the only ones in the world even discussing this particular concept.
Right.
We are like prophets. We are like lone prophets crying in the wilderness, and it's going to be an interesting exercise to see if anyone out there is listening to the lone prophets.
Yeah, please let us know.
Yes, please do.
Yeah. Jonathan, thank you so much for today's program, and have a great weekend.
You do the same.
We'll see you on Tuesday, same place, same time.
Definitely.
Glory to Ukraine. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Bye bye.